Have you ever wondered how wealth and power have intertwined throughout history? Let's take a step back in time, to an era where the foundations of wealth were being laid. In the ancient world, wealth wasn't just about shiny gold coins or sparkling jewels. It was about land, resources, and manpower. The mightier the ruler, the more territory they controlled, and consequently, the wealthier they were. Let's take a detour to the banks of the Nile, where the pharaohs of Egypt reigned supreme. The pharaohs were considered gods on earth, and their wealth, unsurprisingly, was colossal. How did they amass such fortunes? Well, Egypt was a hub for trade and agriculture, boasting fertile lands that yielded abundant crops. The pharaohs, being the ultimate landlords, collected a hefty part of the produce as taxes. Plus, they had an extensive network of trade routes, which allowed them to accumulate wealth from far and wide. But wait, let's not forget about the tributes. The pharaohs often received lavish gifts from vassal states and conquered peoples, further fattening their coffers. This wealth was not just a symbol of their power, but also used to build monumental structures like the pyramids that have stood the test of time. Now let's voyage to the heart of the ancient world, Rome. The emperors of Rome, much like the pharaohs, capitalized on conquests, taxes, and tributes. But they had another trick up their sleeve: mining. Rome was rich in precious metals, and the emperors made sure to exploit these resources to their fullest. The wealth was used not only for personal extravagance, but also to finance public works and military campaigns, further cementing their power. So, you see, the ancient rulers were quite the financial strategists. They understood that wealth was not just about personal opulence. It was a tool, a means to an end, be it to fund wars, build infrastructure, or simply to display their might. The ancient rulers set the precedent of amassing wealth, a trend that would continue for centuries. And, as we'll see, their successors were more than willing to follow in their footsteps, using wealth as a stepping stone to power and influence. As we move into the Middle Ages, wealth takes on a new form. This period, spanning from the 5th to the 15th century, saw dramatic shifts in the distribution and ownership of wealth, particularly within the kingdoms of Europe. In the Middle Ages, wealth was often tied to land ownership. The monarchs of the time, such as those of England, France, and Spain, amassed considerable fortunes through their control of vast tracts of land. These lands were not only sources of agricultural wealth, but also provided resources like timber, minerals, and livestock. However, the land was more than just a source of material wealth. It was also a symbol of power and influence. The more land a monarch controlled, the greater their perceived power and status. Yet, land was not the only form of wealth during the Middle Ages. Another significant source of riches was the spoils of war, particularly through the Crusades. These holy wars, fought primarily between Christian Europe and the Muslim world, were not just about religion. They were also about wealth and power. Monarchs and nobles often returned from the Crusades with vast fortunes, looted from the cities they conquered. But perhaps the wealthiest institution during the Middle Ages was the Catholic Church. As the dominant religious institution in Europe, the Church amassed an immense fortune through donations, tithes, and the sale of indulgences. The wealth of the Church was so vast that it often rivaled and sometimes even surpassed that of the monarchs. Yet, the Church's wealth was not just about money. It was also about influence. With its vast riches, the Church was able to exert significant control over the monarchs and the nobility, shaping the political and social landscape of the time. The Middle Ages saw a shift in wealth from individuals to institutions, a trend that would shape the future of wealth and power. The wealth of the Middle Ages was not just about material riches. It was a complex interplay of money, power, and influence, a dance that would continue to shape the course of history. With the dawn of the Age of Exploration, wealth and power took on a global dimension. This was an era where monarchies of Europe extended their influence far beyond their borders, seeking new lands and resources to fuel their growing economies and fill their royal coffers. Spain and Portugal, the two pioneering nations of this era, amassed unimaginable wealth from their colonial possessions. The Spanish crown, for instance, reaped the rewards of gold and silver from the New World. The influx of precious metals from the Americas into Spain was so significant that it caused a price revolution across Europe. Meanwhile, Portugal established a vast maritime empire spanning from South America to Africa and Asia. The profits from the spice trade alone were enough to make Portugal one of the richest nations of the period. However, it's crucial to remember that this wealth was not without cost. Indigenous cultures were often oppressed, their lands seized, and their people exploited. The transatlantic slave trade also played a significant role in the accumulation of wealth during this period. European powers such as Spain, Portugal, England, and France transported millions of enslaved Africans to the Americas. The labor of these enslaved people was used to extract resources and produce goods, generating vast profits for the European powers and their colonies. The age of exploration was not only about the discovery of new lands, but also about the establishment of global trade networks. These networks connected continents and people in ways never before seen. They facilitated the exchange of goods, cultures, and ideas, but also of diseases, conflicts, and exploitation. This era of exploration and colonization fundamentally reshaped the world. It laid the groundwork for the emergence of the modern global economy. It was a period marked by a hunger for wealth and power, with monarchs and merchants willing to cross oceans and conquer lands in their pursuit of riches. The age of exploration marked a period of unprecedented wealth accumulation, driven by exploitation and trade. The Industrial Revolution brought about a new era of wealth and power. This transformative period saw the shift of wealth from the gold-filled coffers of monarchs to the smoke-billowing factories of industrialists. It was the dawn of a new age, where wealth was no longer inherited, but created through innovation and industry. The Industrial Revolution saw the rise of self-made men, who leveraged the power of technology and industry to amass fortunes that would rival, and in some cases dwarf, those of the wealthiest monarchs. One such figure was Andrew Carnegie. Born into a poor Scottish family, Carnegie immigrated to the United States and built a steel empire that made him one of the wealthiest men in history. His story is a testament to the opportunities the Industrial Revolution offered to those with the drive and ingenuity to seize them. Then there was John D. Rockefeller, a man whose name became synonymous with wealth. Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company, which controlled a vast majority of the American oil industry at its peak. His business tactics may have been ruthless, but they were undeniably effective. Rockefeller's fortune at the time of his death in 1937 would be worth over $300 billion in today's money, making him the wealthiest individual in modern history. But the Industrial Revolution didn't just give rise to wealthy individuals, it also saw the birth of corporations. Today, corporations wield immense power and influence, with many having economies larger than some nations. These corporate entities have amassed wealth on a scale that even the most opulent monarchs could only dream of. In the modern era, the influence of corporations continues to shape our world. From the tech giants of Silicon Valley to the multinational corporations that span the globe, these entities have become the new power players in the global economy. The Industrial Revolution marked a significant shift in wealth, with power moving from the hands of monarchs to those of industrialists and corporations. This shift continues to influence our world today, shaping the fortunes of individuals and nations alike. From ancient times to the modern era, wealth and power have been inextricably linked. As we have journeyed through history, we've seen that the genesis of wealth was deeply rooted in land ownership. The Fertile Crescent, the valleys of the Nile, and the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates were the cradles of civilization, where rulers amassed wealth through agriculture and trade. In the Middle Ages, the narrative of wealth took an interesting turn. Monarchs and rulers, from the Byzantine Empire to England's Plantagenet kings, began to centralize wealth in the form of gold, silver, and other precious commodities. They built monumental structures, fortresses, and cathedrals as symbols of their power and wealth. Then came the age of exploration and colonization, a period in history that saw a seismic shift in the distribution of wealth. The Spanish conquistadors, the British Empire, the Dutch East India Company, and other colonial powers amassed enormous wealth by exploiting resources from the New World, Africa and Asia. The wealth was no longer confined to land or precious metals, but expanded to include spices, cotton, and precious stones. With the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and the modern era, the nature of wealth changed once again. The Industrial Revolution paved the way for the rise of a new class of wealthy individuals, the industrialists and capitalists. The power shifted from kings and emperors to industrial magnates and entrepreneurs who amassed wealth through the production and trade of goods. Today, in the modern era, wealth continues to exert a profound influence on power dynamics. However, the forms of wealth have become more diverse and complex. It's not just about land, gold, or commodities anymore, but stocks, bonds, and digital currencies. So, as we've seen, the forms and sources of wealth have evolved over time. Yet, one thing remains constant: the link between wealth and power. From ancient rulers to modern billionaires, those who control the wealth control the power. While the sources and forms of wealth have changed over time, its correlation with power remains as strong as ever.